right.
You ready for us to start?
Yep.
All right. So if you are new to our sessions, this is our second session on UDL. We did a session just kind of providing an overview, which Hope has a recording of, and I'm sure we'd be happy to send out if you missed that. But today we are going to jump into the area of multiple means of engagement. And I'm Dr. Misty Parsley, and we have Dr. Robbie Hampton, and we're both from the College of Education. We're starting with this little cartoon. We all like to make fun of or not make fun of, we all like to point out the T-Rex with his tiny arms. So this teacher says, looks like it'll be another F in class participation, Rex, because he did not have a way to participate because the teacher can't see his hand raising. So very cute, very cute. Where'd you find that, Robbie?
I did a Google search of cartoons related to UDL. You can find everything in a Google search.
Very good. We were talking about problem solving in my undergrad class yesterday. We're talking about goal writing. We're talking about problem solving, and we equated it to people who put things on Facebook like, does anyone know if the grocery store is open right now? Or does anyone know what time the mall closes tomorrow night? And I said, we just need a Google search icon that we just put on people,
Mm-hmm.
So because it amazes me how people don't just search for it. Like in the time you wrote that on Facebook, you could have searched for whatever you're asking me about. All right, so this is kind of our reminder chart of UDL. And as a reminder, we're not talking necessarily specifically about students with disabilities. We're really talking about all individuals. We all have different learning styles, and UDL is about ensuring that all students can learn and participate in class. So today we are focusing on multiple means of engagement, and this area is related to the affective networks in our brain, the why of learning, the motivation, the finding purpose in what we're learning. And as we were preparing for this today, I know that I was just really drawn to just what we do in education, in the education field, and how we are constantly figuring out how to motivate learners and engage learners in our material. And it's interesting because Robbie and I both teach special ed classes, and our students are so excited about learning about special ed. And a lot of times in undergrad, they've had all their gen ed requirements and they're finally in special ed classes and they're so excited. So I don't feel like I have to do this a lot because they're so excited. But I'm going to guess that some of you, if you teach more of the gen eds, may, how do you get kids to connect with topics that they're not that interested in? They know they have to take math. They know they have to take sciences. They know they have to take English classes, and they may not be that interested in that topic. So how do you get them excited? So I thought that would be a good opening question to open this up, is just how do you currently get students engaged and excited and motivated to learn what you're teaching them? And in this class, the chat window is always an option. You may type in the chat or you may use your microphone. Tamara, what would you like to say?
Okay, I guess with teaching the classes that nobody else wants to teach, the gen eds, for me, it's basically, I don't use this as looking what interests them, but what interests me, and that's teaching them the handiwork of God. So it's more of a spiritual calling than it is a biological calling, if that makes sense. It's like I'm going to tie everything I can two, this is you, this is what God made for you, how it links together, how awesome they are, especially right now with the mental stress that all of them are going through. I'm finding that, you know, I've forgotten that I usually by now have told my students about 3 or 4 times that I love them. And I'm listening. And I think that, you know, mentally, that's something that they need. They don't expect it. It comes out of the woodwork and they're just like, what? And it's like, this is why I love you. This is, you know, this is how you're made. This is why you need to know it. And I think that's just the big thing, is making it relevant to them, making them see that they have a purpose when it comes to biology.
Yeah.
And it's not biology alone.
Yeah. Great. I love that.
I'll just piggyback off Tammy since I'm in the biology department also. I mostly teach the anatomy and physiology class to the pre-nursing students and dietetic students. And that is not really that hard to get them. I mean, they're excited, they're interested in taking that class because it's one of the first classes they take that really relates to what they're gonna do. But in my intro A&P class, I have a lot of students who are like social work majors are required to take it. And it takes me a minute to get them to see the point. And so I do a lot of, you know, what's your career goal like at the start? And then I work really hard to incorporate that into everything we do. So they have a project where they get to pick a disease that affects the human body. And they have to tell me how that knowledge is going to help them in their future career. And I've gotten some pretty creative answers, and I put them in groups for that project where they're not with anyone else that's the same major as them, mostly, or I might have like 2 of the same major. But I've had like sports management people in that class and psychology majors. And so it's been really, that seems to help when, you know, and it takes some quick thinking sometimes, but I'm like, you need to know this stuff. But then I'm like, do you have a human body? and like, we all have this. It's going to help us to learn about ourselves. And so I think it's just the constant reminders of like why this class is important, and not being afraid, you know, not just when they say, I'm not a science person, not just blowing that off, but explaining to them, yes, you can do this and you can be a science person. And
yeah, that's great. And that's what, to me, this area is a little bit different than the representation and action and expression, because just like Jill just said, sometimes we have to kind of think on our feet about, okay, they're not connecting with this topic. And I do have that in some of my classes of, you know, okay, they're not connecting to this topic. I've got to figure out how to help them connect more. And to me, that's just something we do with all students. It's not, what we want to talk about today is different ways of doing that. But it's something we want to do with all of our students, right? So,
yeah, I, as Misty said, I typically teach the SPED classes, but this semester I inherited a class from junior high that is more of it. It's all of our education students, and I'm seeing that I need to, create that hook for them more so than I did with my other students. And it's like Misty said, I just have to think on my feet and consider the fact that it's 8 o'clock in the morning and most of them are still asleep. But yeah, it's different when they can truly relate to it versus, not really understanding the why, as we said.
Yeah, good. Tuka, I know you are in pharmacy, correct?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure I remembered that correctly. Fallon, what department are you in?
Nate and I are teaching a GE. We're
Okay.
teaching an explorations course. Yeah.
Okay, awesome, great. Okay, so And as you probably know, in the future, we will do a session on representation and a session on action and expression to round out our UDL tour. This is a great little handout. We're going to have slides to go into more detail, but this is just a great little handout that will be in the PowerPoint that Hope will send out, that just has really quick examples. Now, this is really more of a K-12 document, but I feel like some of these can be adapted for college for sure. And so this just kind of gives you our list of all the things we're going to talk about, and then just with some examples tied in. We may come back to this later on, but just wanted you to know that was there. So I think you, oh, go ahead.
So, I mean, what we wanted to do before we jump into it is just sort of put, this into layman's terms. The primary things that we're going to be talking about today, how do we get the students hooked? How do we get them, ready to move into that lesson and buy into what we're talking about? I think it was Jill who talked about they don't always understand the relation of what we're talking about to their experiences. And then we want to give them choices whenever we can. And that truly will help with that engagement.
Yeah. And again, it's funny because, coming from a K-12 world, and teaching K-12 teachers, we talk about all these things. But really, I've learned in my time at Lipscomb that these are still relevant to our students in the college setting. And I don't think any of you in this room, still use the 100% lecture model of standing up and not, doing any kind of check to see if your students are engaged or connecting to what you're saying. But I think that remembering that we do have to make it relevant to them and get them to buy in, because we all know that we learn more when we are motivated and are bought into what we're learning. And so just some good reminders. When I first, Robbie and I had a conversation about this slide, because when I first saw it, I was like, oh, it feels so K-12. But really, we still do these things. We still want to make sure that our students are, hooked in and motivated. And even with student choice, I'm starting to use that a little bit more, especially with online. I've given a lot more choices. It's amazing how much they appreciate that, and how much they are more committed to the class because of that. So we're going to talk about some specific examples. I added this slide because I thought it was really interesting, and I kind of wanted to know what Julia and Hope thought about it too. And it's a little bit older. I think the date on it actually is 2012. But I think it's really interesting because, and I know there's different philosophies on technology in the classroom. And I know even in some ways we're starting to go the other way. If we used to really put in a lot of technology, and now we're kind of saying, oh, maybe we don't need to use all technology. But I think what this is saying is that students are motivated by technology. And if we can figure out even ways to put in a quiz, a game, an activity that can be done if you're in the classroom versus online, and then if you're online, finding ways to really use your technology. Again, putting in quizzes, putting in polls, putting in breakout rooms where you're really maximizing the use of that technology. And I think what we're really faced with is that, especially if you look at the kids that are going to be graduating in the next year or so, they're using 100% technology right now. And so they're going to be very used to learning with technology. And so I just threw this in because I felt like it was relevant to our topic of giving students choice of technology, giving students choice of how they use their technology, giving them the choice to bring their own technology, letting them, use their laptop for notes or their tablet for notes, or just something to think about. I don't necessarily have a strong opinion about it one way or the other. And I don't know if there's more recent research on technology in college classrooms. But I just thought this was interesting. I found this on a college website. So yeah, Hope or Julia, do you want to comment?
I'll start, and then if Julie has anything to add. One of the things with technology is, and I think Julia would say this as well with, with the classes we teach for College of Ed and technology integration is, not using technology for technology's sake, making sure that there's a purpose behind the technology that you're using, and being intentional about it, and kind of sharing that with the students of why you're doing it. One of the things that's I have found really interesting, the number of students who actually use the Canvas app to do all of the Canvas stuff. And I watched this when we went remote with my oldest, and he wrote a paper on his cell phone to upload into Canvas, and so, I love the idea of, thinking about it. But, one of the things that I think gets people when it comes to actually utilizing technologies in the classroom is that they haven't set up the expectations for the students when it comes to utilizing those technologies. So that's something that, I let my students bring their, devices to class, but they know what the expectations are. And if I say, all right, 30 degrees, that means that they turn it at a 30-degree angle and pay attention to whatever we're going to be talking about, and not looking at their devices. So, kind of building on that.
Yeah, I like that. And I think that's that we'll talk about expectations, even around discussion boards and things like that. We need to be putting in more expectations, so that the students know what the engagement should be, how they should engage with those tools. So it's a great point. Julia, did you want to add something?
I just wanted to say that with the use of technology, it, as Hope said, it needs to be meaningful, but you really need to think about how that technology can enhance what you're doing. Not that it's just a nice because I want to motivate my students. So it really needs to be tied in centrally, either enhancing what you're doing, or we're going to attempt this that wouldn't be possible without this technology, kind of thing.
Yeah. And that's why I like
to be really intentional in the use of technology, because a lot of times we make assumptions that the students do understand how to use it and the purpose for using it. We're preparing our candidates to go out and teach in a virtual world. We're seeing that that's not going to change. Snow days are probably gone, but I did a class the other day and students needed to be able to share their screen for a presentation, and they didn't know how to do that. I made the assumption, because we've lived in Zoom world for the last, 10 months, and the students don't necessarily know how to use all of the pieces of the technology we've got out there.
Yeah, great point. All right. So our first area of engagement is providing options for recruiting interest.
And what we've done is we've taken the guidelines that you saw at the beginning of the presentation, and to be honest, we have not focused on all of the areas, because we truly feel like some of them are more K-12 geared rather than higher ed. But we just wanted to take some of the primary points and then give you examples or ways of incorporating, but also want to hear from you, any of these areas that we cover. If you've got examples of how you're implementing or using it in your department, we would love to hear that. So the first area is the notion of choice and autonomy. Students making sure that whenever possible, if there are rewards or recognitions available, that they have some say in what that might be. Students are going to buy in. I don't care whether they're K-12 or higher ed. If they feel like they've had some input, they're going to buy into it a lot faster than they would if it's something that's been handed down to them. That using that context for practicing and assessing skills. When we are doing activities with our students, we want to make sure that not only are we talking about what it means, but then putting it into words that they're going to understand. And I often find myself doing that not only in a content area, so in our case, the educational world, but the real world. I mean, if you can make them understand what it looks like in their day-to-day lives, they're really going to understand it. And then just some simple things such as, graphics and color and design, setting personal academic goals. I know for all of us, we have, standards that we have to meet and expectations that students have to achieve. But whenever we've got an opportunity to give students, a chance to set their own goals, that's really important. Misty, if you want to go ahead and.
Yeah, I was gonna, before I switch sides, I wanted to say, and I think that I think the idea of letting students participate in the design of classroom activities or tasks is interesting. I will say it's not one I've used really, but I think it's interesting to think about how students could participate in how you do something in class. Now, I do this on the fly sometimes. So I might say to my students, okay, I have this activity and we have about 15 minutes. So we could either do this or we could do this, and give them just choice in how we do that activity. I'm going to assume if they've chosen the way we do the activity, that they're going to be more engaged in it, right? Because they chose. And so it might be, do y'all want to do this as a group? Do y'all want to do this in small group? Do you want to do this as homework? And I do sometimes say, I have this one more thing we need to do. If y'all are ready to get out of here, you have to do it as homework, and give them that choice. And then I expect them to do the homework if that's what they've chosen to go on home, especially in my grad classes when it's 9 o'clock and everybody's ready to go home. But I want to show you this really cool example of choice that I got from another university, and I'm hoping this will work if I click on this. All right, can y'all see using choice boards? So this is a choice board that was used in an education program at Maryville College. And this was when we switched to virtual back in the spring, and students still needed to get practicum hours. And so they created this choice board. So there's several things I like about it from a UDL perspective. First of all, it gives choice. Second of all, it is on Google Slides, and so it's interactive. So it's cool, it's neat, it's engaging, because you click on each one of these. So let's say this one says remote learning fact sheet. You click on it and it gives you the activity that you have to do. And so then here's your back arrow, and then here's video tutorial podcast. If you choose that one, here's the activity. So it's all contained. It's visual. It's very clear directions. So I just think it's the choice board idea. And the choice board idea really comes from a perspective on differentiated instruction of giving students choices. And in that choice board is a way to differentiate difficulty level. You could have harder assignments. You could have easier assignments. And if you know your students, you could say, okay, I want you to choose from the top row. And that's where you've put the assignments that that student can do. But you have a student that really thirsts for more knowledge and more information and is advanced, maybe already had some anatomy classes in high school. And you could say, I want you to choose from the bottom row, because those are the more challenging. So that you can use choice boards in so many ways. But the bottom line is students are choosing when they do these assignments. And if you say you only have to choose 4 of them, they're choosing which ones they do. And then I just love that it's in Google Slides. And so when you get this PowerPoint, you can make a copy of this and you can edit it yourself and use the choice board for your class. So I had asked the professor if I could share that today.
we did something very similar with our student teachers back in the spring, because of course we went immediately to them not being able to go into classrooms anymore, but to get their license, they still had to have hours. And so we came up with a variety of different ways that they could get the hours they needed. And then they got to choose which of those that they, completed by the end of the semester.
Yeah.
All right. So, and this is a concept that's not new to any of us. We want to make sure that the things that we are doing are relevant for our students. I often see myself, in front of a class going on and on about a certain topic, and I get this glassy-eyed look from everybody in the room. But the minute I relate it to something that they are dealing with or something that's going on, then, all of a sudden I've got hands raised, I've got people commenting in the chat box. And so they see what the reason is that we are talking about it. One of the classes that I teach is on cultural perspectives. And that is one, especially over the last couple of semesters. Obviously, there is a lot going on in our society and in our communities that makes it very relevant. And giving them the opportunity to bring in those experiences and talk about the things that they are dealing with, either on our own campus or in our community, has really helped deepen the discussions that we are having with each other. We want tasks that can take place in our classrooms. Misty said a minute ago, if it's something that they are doing, they're going to be much more engaged than if we're just sitting there lecturing for 4 hours at night. And then a chance to really use their imagination. One thing that I've done with a book project that my students have to do is they get to decide how they're going to present that book to the class. No more standing up reading a book report. And I've just been amazed at the different ways that they've come up with. I mean, we had one activity that it was a book in a bag. And so they had put items into the bag that represent themes of the book. And I found myself even wondering what they were going to pull out next to make that book relevant and to explain what was going on, in that book for their classmates.
That's neat.
Misty.
So an example for this in our virtual world we're in is really thinking about your assignments and how you can gear them towards our virtual world. I think we all realize that a lot of the virtual stuff is here to stay, because we've realized that things can be done virtually that we never did virtually. So things like meetings. I signed a will on Zoom. We don't have to ever go to a lawyer's office again. We can just sign, so there are things that we've done. We signed, we had a lot going on during the pandemic. We refinanced our house, which we had already started right before it started. And so we did a car signing, and we sat in our car, and the attorney brought the paper, and then she went back in her office and called us and walked us through the paperwork, and we signed. Then she came back out and got it. And, it's like there's so many things, but helping our students understand how to do the skills we're teaching them in this new virtual world. And it's funny because Robbie and I've laughed, because our students often ask us for advice, and then our graduates, still text us and stuff. And we're like, we're in trouble because we've never done this before. We don't know. This is all new. Like, what are we going to tell them? So finding our own resources, and we started a Google doc that we can share with any of our graduates of just all the virtual resources we found related to special ed. And we add to it regularly as we find things. But helping them, adding that in somewhere of how we do some of the things that we teach them to do in a virtual world. And I know there's a lot of things we hope don't stay virtual. Classes is one that I will be very sad if we never get to have face-to-face class again. But we also have to practice, those skills. So.
The notion of threat is something that we don't really think about as much, I think, in higher ed, but some of our students become very nervous when they're confronted with the expectations in our classrooms and the fear of, I can't do it and I don't have the ability. And so we just want to make sure that we are providing the supports that they need to feel comfortable to express themselves and to feel like they truly have the ability to complete some of the work that we're asking. I personally see that some of my students, they won't open their mouths to speak up in class at all. But now that many of them are learning virtually, they'll type stuff into the chat box all day long. And I may sometimes have to read it for them because they still don't want to, people to hear them, but they're participating. Whereas if I'm going to wait for them to raise their hand and offer to answer a question, it's just not going to happen. Discussion forums, again, you can have some really deep discussion amongst your students and with you and your students if they've got the opportunity to think about it. Some of our students have issues with processing, and it may take them longer to decide what they want to say. And by the time they've come up with their response, one of their classmates has already answered the question. But a discussion forum is going to give them that opportunity to truly think about what they want to say and type it out, and not feel threatened by that need for an immediate response.
I should have put this picture example, and I just remembered that I didn't put it in here. If I can find it, I will post it in the chat window. But I used a check-in several times this summer with my students, and it was an emoji check-in. So it was, if you pick your, and I think it was different colored hearts. So put in the chat window the heart that associates with whatever. And it was, I'm doing great, I'm doing okay, I'm not doing well, and so that you can be creative even in the chat window with the different responses. And students, I've done some classroom starters that are just like one word. Put in the word you're feeling right now, put in a word from your weekend, just things to kind of get them going on the chat window. Here it is. Let's see if this works. All right, so hopefully y'all can open that file that I just sent. Did it work? So that's just an example of, and you can put that in, I don't know if y'all can see that, but you can put that in and just flash it up, and my computer's like running really slowly all of a sudden. Jan is coming at 1:45, so I've already submitted a ticket for my computer. So, all right. And as we go through these, if y'all have ideas of things that you've done, please share, stop us, put in the chat window.
So I have a question.
I was going to say, can I share something at this point?
Absolutely.
Yes, Tuka had a question.
Yeah, that's fine.
Sorry.
Julia, you can go ahead. It's fine.
Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't hear that. So back to, what you were talking about regarding minimizing those threats and giving them different ways to respond. One of the things that I've recently gotten into, and I used it in my class this week, is Google Jamboard is now part of our Google Suite. And it's a great, if anybody's used Padlet, it's kind of like Padlet, where it gives you a board and then students click on a little sticky, and it's like a sticky note kind of thing, and then they type in their response, and it pops their sticky note on a board, and then you can move them around and that sort of thing. So I tried that with my students this week, and they really liked doing that kind of thing because it was a little bit different, you know?
Yeah, that's neat. I'll have to check that out. Tuka, what was your question?
Yes, so I had a question like earlier on how we were talking about letting students engage and participating like in the activities that are for rewards or recognition. So what do you think of allowing students to participate? Like, for example, telling them, do you want this quiz to be multiple choice or essay questions? Like, I know that the faculty, they have to have some guidelines for the exam, but what do you think of that? Of letting students also participate, like in how they
Yeah.
want their exams to be.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a great idea. I guess from a faculty perspective, it's just making sure it's meeting your objectives, you know? So if it doesn't matter, if you can meet objectives in essay or in multiple choice, I mean, why not give them, and I often when I do a paper test like that, I often have a variety, you know, I'll have multiple choice and short answer and maybe an essay or maybe a matching, you know, I try to mix it up just to have a variety of options. But I mean, anyone else have an opinion on letting students choose the test format?
I a couple of semesters ago, I was teaching a new class and had designed the final, and not really thinking, but it was primarily short answer. And I got a lot of feedback from students. You know, it wasn't a hard exam, but the amount of time and effort it took, you know, to answer those questions was ridiculous. I mean, it took almost more time than what they were allowed to complete the final. And so I definitely, when I designed my exam for the next semester, took that into account. And some of those questions that had been short answer, I did convert them into other question types, as long as I felt like I was still getting the same level of information from my students.
Yeah. I also think, like, you know, if you are teaching in a content area where there is a certification exam that your students have to take, you know, making sure that you know, provide those types of questions is going to be similar. But I know, like, specifically for College of Pharmacy, probably nursing as well, they are very, you know, they've asked me a lot of questions about like exam, you know, developing exams and, you know, thinking about the amount of time that it may actually take for a student to complete the exam. Because, you know, if we work through an exam, you know, ourselves, then it may take 1.25% longer for students to actually answer those questions as well. There's been some research around it. So like Misty said, I think, you know, as long as it's meeting the outcomes of the course, you know, I love the idea of kind of switching up some things, because, like, for me, I know I'm a better, you know, test taker with this type of test versus another type of test for myself personally.
I also do something fun with my test, because I teach special ed law and we talk about accommodations. On their final exam, when we do it in person, they get 3 accommodations, and they can choose to use their accommodations during the test if they want to. They don't have to. And one is they can ask a friend for an answer. One is they can ask me for clarification. And then the other one is they can look in their notes for one question. And so, you know, it's always fun, and it's an added, like, it makes the exam not quite so stressful, reduces that threat of that exam. And, you know, there's a few questions that are like worth 10 points that I don't let them, you know, use help on, but that's been something fun I've done, you know, just, it relates to the class and gives the students, you know, just a little help. You know, exams are, I don't know, I kind of have mixed feelings on exams, but I agree with Hope. When you have that certification exam that you've got to prepare students for, you can't not ever have exams, because, you know, in teaching, there's multiple tests that they have to go take that are timed and, you know, high pressure, high stakes tests. And so you don't want them to never take a test so that they're not prepared when it comes to that certification exam. So good question. All right, we're gonna have to scroll through some things because we have like 10 minutes left and we're only on our second area. So in some of this, it overlaps a little bit, I think, as we go through. But you know, I think helping students understand the goal of what you're doing, and again, just a common strategy used in education. You know, we start lessons with learning objectives. We have statements on the board of what students are going to learn from that lesson. We always want students to know what the purpose of the lesson is. And so I do this in a couple of ways. I usually start class with, here's what we're talking about today. I usually end class with, here's what we're going to do next week or next time we meet, so that they're always knowing kind of what is going on. And then one thing that I really started doing consistently this summer when we were online is weekly messages. And so I would typically either write an announcement in Canvas or sometimes record a weekly message. And I would always post it on the same day. I usually posted it on Sunday. And so they knew that every Sunday there was going to be a message from me. It would refocus them on, you know, what they need to be working on, prep them for an upcoming class, get them excited. I might tell a little story about something to get it, that little hook to get them excited about the lesson that was coming up or whatever. I have no idea if my students liked it, if they read them, if they, but it made me feel like I was giving them useful information. So sometimes we do these things and I don't know if they're, you know, I don't know, but anyway, I liked the, you know, the practice of it. So.
This one we pretty much talked on. You know, sometimes we've got the ability to vary the level of difficulty within an assignment. And that's just something to think about. Also scaffolding, and there's a slide in here in a few minutes. You know, we've got several, here we go. Within our department, we've got some major key assignments that students are required to do. And what we have found is if we just wait until the end and collect that assignment, we realize that students did not have what they needed in order to complete that. So we've started chunking those assignments or scaffolding those assignments, and students are required to turn in pieces along the way. And that gives us an opportunity to give feedback, which is something that we're going to touch on in a second. But it also sets, you know, key points between now and the end of the semester where it keeps students accountable. It's like, oh yeah, I've got to get at least part of it done now, and I can't wait until the day before class ends to do the entire assignment.
Yeah.
So these are just two articles that I found that specifically talk about scaffolding at the higher ed level.
Great, those look good. I think that, you know, obviously we all strive to build a community of with our classes. This has probably become a little more challenging online. That's why I do some things like check-in activities. And, you know, I really like students, my graduate students, I really like them to know what schools they're working at and what grade levels they're working with, because I think it helps them connect with one another. But really thinking about how to use your discussion boards and how to, is everybody using breakout rooms? You know, I think the breakout rooms are really helpful for getting students to talk in smaller groups. I rarely do a breakout room of more than 3 people. I sometimes will do 4 if I have a really large class, but I have found that the smaller numbers seem to do better. And then I just pop in each breakout room while they're in there and just make sure they're on topic, see if they have any questions, that sort of thing. I have found, talking about giving expectations, that you really have to give clear expectations. I've started giving them a handout to use in the breakout room, because they'll get in there. Someone invariably did not hear what I said. And so they get in the breakout room, they're like, what are we supposed to do? And so, and they do that in person too. You know, when we used to have in-person classes, they did the same thing. I'd walk around and they're like, we're not really sure what we're supposed to be doing. It's like, did you hear the directions? So I give them a document that they can, because once we go into breakout rooms, they can't see what's on the screen. And so then they have, you know, that document to look back on. And I've done various strategies. I've told them they'll have to share out. So that means they have to pay attention to what they're doing so they can share out. I'll tell them sometimes to have a reporter. So they have to identify a person who's going to share out. Sometimes I'll have them do, you know, type notes or something that they turn in. So there's a variety of ways you can make sure that they're collaborating in that small group, depending on what the activity is. And I do have a breakout. I'm sorry, this is a discussion post rubric. So the other thing is using your discussion board. And so one idea that one of our faculty had was they start a discussion in a breakout room towards the end of class. Then at the very end of class, they say, now I want you to go to the discussion board and I want you to either reflect on it or continue the discussion, or you have a follow-up question. Okay, you discussed question 1 in breakout rooms. Now go to the discussion board and discuss question 2. And so it has that carryover and continuing that conversation in that different type of format. So some people might not say much in a breakout room, but then they get to the discussion board and they're willing to make a lot of comments. And so it varies the way that the discussion can occur. So, and then here's a sample rubric for a discussion board post that really focuses more on the quality of what they're writing. You know, it's adding to the discussion. It's not just saying, yay, nice job, I like what you said. So I've started using a rubric for my discussion boards, and I think that's been helpful.
With feedback, we just want to make sure that it's specific. This is something that we focus on a lot with our candidates because they will, you know, become teachers themselves. It's not okay to say good job. I mean, going back to the rubric that we just saw, when you use a rubric, then students are getting very specific feedback that they can utilize the next time they do an activity to you know, continue to improve the work that they're doing.
One of my favorite formats for feedback is Flipgrid. I like to do assignments on Flipgrid because when you are watching an assignment on Flipgrid, then as soon as the assignment gets done, so let's say the student records a 5-minute reflection on an article they read. As soon as they finish, it has a button that says give video feedback. And I can click that and record a message back to them immediately. So first of all, it helps them see that it's okay to see yourself on video because I'm going to record that video message back to you. I'm not afraid to be on video and I will, you know, show you that. I think that we can be more expressive in our video than we can in writing. So we can, you know, I can remember one assignment this summer and I'd had the students read this article and it was about our assumptions that we have on people with severe disabilities. Well, there was a parent in my class who had a child with a severe disability. And I thought, well, this is going to be really interesting to see what his impression is of this article, because he has a daughter who's 20 years old. So it's not like it's a new child. He's had her for 20 years and he's seen people's reactions to his daughter and all that. His response blew me away because he said, wow, that article convicted me. Sometimes I don't have high enough expectations and I have these assumptions about my daughter, and it just blew me away. So when I recorded my response to him, I remember I was probably kind of giddy, like, oh my goodness, like that was so cool that you had this. And I had this real natural response. And he laughed about it later and said, you know, how excited I was about his response to his reading. But it was just so natural because it was video, and instead of me taking the time to do this polished response on, you know, in written format and all that. So if you haven't used Flipgrid, I really encourage it. And I don't know Hope and Julia, if y'all know of any other of those types of video kinds of things that's easy to do video feedback. But I just think Flipgrid's the easiest. If you do a video assignment, it's so easy to give a video feedback. So.
Well, there's a video feedback feature in Canvas for Canvas assignments. So you can actually give your feedback on their assignments using video or audio.
I did not know that. So just when like in the assignment where you score the assignment, it's in there?
Yeah, so when you go to the assignment, you go to Speed Grader.
Yeah.
The box where you can type in comments, feedback comments right there below where you put the numerical grade. There's an icon there's some buttons underneath that text box. And one of those buttons allows you to record either a video or an audio feedback.
I had no idea. Wow.
That's your
You
free.
should have gone to that session that they did a couple of weeks ago on feedback in Canvas.
Yeah, you're right. I probably should have. That's awesome. Very cool. I can't wait to use that. Okay, so we did not get to our third area, but it's 12:55, so I think we're supposed to end, aren't we? And this is I will just do a quick summary of this. This is really probably the less relevant for college age, but there are some things that we built in here. But this one's really talking about how we, things that we can put in that help students be motivated, as well as things that help them self-assess and reflect. I've started putting in some self-assessments in my classes where they have to turn in, and I have one class where they have to turn in the rubric filled out. They have to score themselves, and it's on a 5-point scale, and I can't believe how many students give themselves 3. I'm like, then fix it. Don't turn it in with 3s. And then I have some that give themselves all 5s, and they're not all 5s. But so that they're really thinking about the work that they turn in. And then reflection. Now, I mean, I will say in education, we've become really big on reflection because we know that reflective teachers are better teachers. But I think this goes for any field. When you can stop and think about the work that you're doing and reflect on an interaction you've had, or reflect on, if you're in the medical profession, a case or a client or, whatever, I think that we are able to make better decisions about, the work that we're doing. And so I do an assignment where they have to reflect after a presentation. So they do their presentation in class, and then they get on the discussion board and they reflect on their presentation. Not how did they present, but what did they learn and how can they link it to the course content. And that's been really cool. And, you can do alternatives to, again, you can do a video reflection. You could have them reflect on Flipgrid. You could do a one-on-one reflection, either over Zoom or in person with masks and plastic and stuff like that. Or you could do a written reflection, in an email. They could send you an email. So you could let them choose, reflect somehow, but somehow send me a reflection on your presentation or on, whatever assignment or whatever. So. All right. Whew.
Yeah.
That was a lot. Sorry that was not as interactive as we would like to have been. But we clearly had too much information in there.
Thank you, Robbie and Misty, for sharing and your expertise. So those of you who weren't at the intro session, when I send out the resources, I'll also include the recording from that session. So you could, if you want to go back and watch it. But one of the things we talked about is that UDL, a lot of it comes out of the K through 12 world. There's not as much in the higher ed world. And so building resources, but one of the ideas that Julia came up with that we had talked about with Misty and Robbie is like utilizing these sessions and coming up with kind of a spreadsheet with some specific ideas that we can all work together to build and share, kind of crowdsourcing together some ideas. Because there are a lot of great ideas. And also for those of you who are participating in the sessions, not me personally, but the CTL will be purchasing for you all Tom Tobin's book, Reach Everyone, Teach Everyone, Universal Design for Learning in Higher Education. So Thank you for participating. We're, you know, with CTL being a little different this year, we still want to provide resources for you all. So I have a bunch of these that I think it may have come in the post office today. So I'll reach out to you all and share this resource with you all as well. So that's your free gift.
I already have it. So can you sub me out another good book?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, I'm all about books. So,
Well, and I was going to say, don't forget, those of you who are on campus, come by and say hello tomorrow and grab some treats. We have individually wrapped treats that you can choose and take with you.
yes.
Is that all day long or a certain time?
All day long. We're monitoring the snack level. So if I have to run out and buy some more, but we'll have some Tiff's treats, which they're going to do individually 2 cookies, chocolate chip and snickerdoodle. And then we've got some salty snacks as well. Awesome. For you to choose from. So.
I'm going to get my flu vaccine, so I'll come by as a reward after my.
There you go. So yeah, come by basement of the library. We miss seeing people's faces and just, you know, come drop by. And thank you all once again so much for participating. Thank you, Misty and Robbie, for sharing with us today. So
thank y'all for being here.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.